Hello everybody, and welcome to this CropWalker Farm and Field Setup webinar. I'm Becca from Muddy Boots, and I'll be taking you through the session today, looking at the CropWalker basics. So to have a look at what we're going to cover in this session, first of all I'll give you a brief overview of how this webinar works and a few more details about that. And then moving on to what we're actually going to cover in CropWalker. So first of all, we'll look at farm setup. That is entering farm details, which is mainly contact details, and adding machinery and operators, which could be contractors working on your farm. Then we'll move on and look at fields and crops. So first of all, how to add fields and then to add single crops to these fields. Then we'll look at fields with more than one crop and how this works in CropWalker. So that could be having two crops in one field or having a margin strip around the edge of one of your fields. Then I'll show you a time-saving way of adding one crop to several different fields. This is done using the multiple field cropping option in CropWalker. Finally, I'll show you what information can be generated out of CropWalker. That's via a cropping report, which gives you information about your field and crops that you can share with your advisor or with your farmer or print for your own records. Then I'll just sum up of everything we've gone over and answer any final questions. Just to note, after each section there, so after farm section and then after the fields and crops section, I'll be pausing to try and answer your questions that you're asking throughout the session. Okay, so to have a look at how this webinar works, first of all you can ask questions directly to me, and to do this you type these into the chat box, which is in the bottom half of the panel on the right hand side of your screen. Another thing to note is that you're all muted within this session, so you can only ask questions directly to me and you can't chat to one another. And finally, just to remind you that a recording of this training will be sent out to you within 24 hours of the session finishing. Okay, so to move on to farm setup and entering farm details, if I open up CropWalker now, so when you open up CropWalker, you'll see this blank blue screen, then on the left-hand side a white panel with menu options. So to add a farm, if you click on the plus sign next to farm information and then click onto farm details, here first of all you'll see a Mr. Haymaker, which is our demo data. So you can use this data to have a play around with the system, adding and editing fields and crops using this data. But I'm going to show you the process of adding a new farm. So down in the bottom left-hand side of the screen, I click onto the New button, and then this clears all the fields. It blanks out all the boxes so you can add your new information. You'll see in this screen there are some titles in italics. That just shows you the data that must be inputted in order to save that farm. So first of all, farmer name and farmer code. If I just set up a Mr. Harvester, so you'll see that the farmer code at the top has automatically generated. If you're using a specific system to record your farmer code, you can click into this box and just edit the text by typing. If not, you can just let CropWalker automatically assign you a farmer code. You'll then move down and enter contact details, which is mainly address details. And then the box at the bottom here, region, just to note on this, as you've got different rules for nutrient requirement in England and Wales and then different again in Scotland, you've got the option here to select your region. So when I click onto England and Wales, I get a warning asking whether I want to update all my farms in CropWalker to England and Wales. This is for the rules for nutrient requirement and compliance rules. So if I just click yes there, it updates all farms. If not, I can click no and update these farms individually with their different regions. So then I'll move over onto the right-hand side where I've got contact telephone number details. So you can just enter all your telephone contacts in there and also an email address. Once I've done this, entered all these details, I just move down and click onto that save button, and that tells me that the farm's details have been saved. I have to save first at this point in order to be able to add a delivery address. So you'll see that this function over on the right hand side of the screen is available now. So if I click to add a delivery address, it opens this new screen where I have the option to copy the delivery address over from the one that I've just entered in farm details. So I'll do that in this case. If not, you can just enter your details of the delivery address in these boxes here. And also, just to note, you can add more than one delivery address by clicking onto the new button down in the bottom of the screen. Once you've done this, you'll then be able to go through and see all your delivery addresses using these arrows on the bottom left-hand side. The other thing just to note in this screen is that I can set this address as the default delivery address. So when recommendations and orders are made, this is the address that will be automatically inputted into the plans. So once I've entered all those address details, I click on to save in this screen and then get back to the main farm details screen. Then in this bottom right hand side, I've just got a few things to note down here. So you've got, first of all, these tick boxes in the right hand column. First of all, whether your farm is in an MVZ, that's a nitrate vulnerable zone, so if you're the farmer you'll know this. And you can tick this option, which means that all your fields on this farm will be assigned to this MVZ. You also have the option to then individually assign fields within the MVZ or not. But if you know that all your fields are in this one area, you can tick that box to assign them to that area. So if I click yes to continue. The next thing is enable data exchange. I would advise you not to tick this box because it locks the permissions between whether you're a farmer or an agronomist. So if you tick this box, you won't be able, one of you won't be able to go in and add or edit information about your fields and crops. So leave that second one unticked. The next one down, allow plan edits, just means that this is available in the agronomist system so that the farmer can go and edit their own ag chem recommendations. And then the next one down, one that's really useful for our farmer users, the enable stock control option. This just allows CropWalker to automatically reduce the amount of products that you have in store when a recommendation is made and confirmed. So if I tick that box, I'll then get a warning that talks about stock term resets. You can just ignore this warning because this is just about zeroing the balance of your stocks, but if you're inputting them for the first time, then you can ignore that warning by clicking OK. The final two things in this farm details screen are the default soil type. So if all your fields are in the same area, here you can select a default soil type, and that just means that it applies this soil type for all fields on this farm. So if I click yes there, again you can individually choose the soil type of fields, and I'll show you that when I move on to setting up the fields of your farm. The final thing in this screen is this default sprayer option. This is a really useful option because it means you can add the capacity. You can enter a sprayer details and add the capacity of that sprayer. So it's really useful for chemical plans to know the sprayer details, that is, spray quality and the capacity. So you'll see that this is a link, and when you hold the mouse over that sprayer text, you'll get a little hand sign appearing. You can click onto that hand sign and it takes you to this machinery screen where you can add your sprayer details. So to do this, I click onto the New button and then enter details for my sprayer. I'll then click into category and choose the sprayer option, which, as you can see, brings up boxes where you can enter the capacity, water volume and spray quantity of this sprayer. Just to note, at the bottom of this screen you've got an area where you can add maintenance activities carried out on any of your machinery. So you've got the option to add date. You can just then type into this action box and add the maintenance activity. You've got the option to add a next due date, so perhaps in a year after that. And then finally you can select the status as complete or outstanding. So once then I've entered all those details, I click onto the Save button and this saves my sprayer details. If I just actually forgot to mention that you should click the default sprayer button if that's the sprayer that's being used the most, so that will automatically appear in your plans. So if I save that again and close out of this screen, I'll just go back into the farm details screen and you can see that that sprayer has now come through as the default sprayer for that farm. Okay, so if I close out of farm details now and just go back, I'll just show you where to add operators then. Underneath this farm information on the left hand side of CropWalker, you've got this operators text. If you click onto that, this is where you can add any contractors that are working on your farms or any sprayer operators. So to do this, again, it's a similar screen. You just click onto the New button and you can then enter details of your sprayer, so that's address details and telephone. Also for compliance, it can be quite important that they're qualified to spray these chemical applications, so you can choose to enter a qualification here if needs be. So the qualification, the certificate number, the date of that qualification, and the expiry date. So once all your operator details are entered, you again click Save and close out of that box. Okay, so just to see where we're at then, I've just been through with you entering farm details, which is mainly the contact details of the farm. Once this is set up, unless anything like the address changes, you don't really need to come back into this screen. The other thing I then showed you was adding machinery, so that default sprayer that I showed you how to add, and operators, which can be contractors or sprayer operators that are applying plans onto your farms. We'll look at adding fields and then putting single crops on these fields, then look at splitting these fields, and finally move on in this section to multiple field cropping area. So if I go back to CropWalker now, And this next area is within the field information section. So if I click onto field information and then click onto this add fields and crops options, when you're adding fields and crops, this is all in this one screen. So you have the tabs along the top, fields, then your current cropping, previous cropping and future cropping. So first of all, to add a field, if I click down on the bottom left hand side onto this add edit fields button, and then onto new field, which is in the bottom left of the screen that opens, you'll then see the information here that you need to input, which is the field name and the area. You can see that they're in italics. So I'll just enter details here. So name, area. Then you can see that that soil type, the default soil type that I set up when adding my farm, has been pulled through onto this field. If the field is in a very different area to the rest of the farm, you can just click into this down arrow and change that soil type. The other thing to note when adding a field is you've got that MVZ option, so if it's borderline MVZ, you can also change that for this field by clicking on that down arrow. The next thing underneath the MVZ box is the area to input any ditches that are in your field. This is really important for the sprayer operators that are coming on to apply the chemical to the field. So you've got the option for dry ditches and then larger ditches of different sizes, which could be more watercourses or streams that are running through your fields. And just to note here, this looks at a field as if it has 4 sides, so you have the option to enter 4 ditches in this area. So once I've added one field there, as there's actually no save button in this screen. To save, if you're adding lots of fields in one go, to save this field you can then click onto new field. If not, if you've finished entering all your field information, you can click close and this saves the field you're previously working on. So to add one more field here, I just enter the field name again and the area and then click close this time. So once all your fields are set up, you'll then see a list of these in this screen here. You can see those 2 that I've just created. So to move on now to adding cropping, if I click onto this current cropping tab, first of all on this first field I've created, I'll add a single crop. So just by clicking into the box underneath the crop heading, I have a drop down arrow which has a list of crops here, and say if I wanted to add a winter wheat crop, to save scrolling through this entire list, I can just type directly into that box and it will appear there for me. One thing to note here is that winter wheats and winter cereal crops are stored under W space and then the name of the crop, so W space wheat in this case, and the same for spring cereal crops. They're saved under SPR space and then the name of the crop. So the next option, if you wish, you can enter a variety in the next box here. And then if I move on, you'll see that this crop has defaulted to the size of the field, so it's filling that whole field. And then I move on to dates. These dates defaulted to the 1st of September to the 31st of August of the current year. If needed, you can go in and change these dates just by clicking into the box and then typing into the date. But otherwise these will be defaulted as this is the most normal cropping year for these kind of crops. So once I've added my current cropping, I can then move on and add any previous cropping. This is done in exactly the same way. So by clicking into that crop box, then entering my crop, and again that area defaults to the size of the fields and the dates default to the 1st of September to the 31st of August from the year before. Exactly the same for future cropping. If you're entering crops in advance of them being planted, that next tab is where you would enter those future crops. So to go back now to current cropping and show you how to add more than one crop to a field, if I click on the left hand side onto my next field that I've created, and then again I click into this crop box and I choose my crop that I want to apply, and then in this area box, to reduce the area of this cropping, I just click into the area box and enter the area that I want this crop to cover. Then to add my next crop, I just click into the box, the next box down underneath the crop heading, and enter the next crop here. If I then click into the area box, I will see that that defaults to the remaining size of the field. Just to note, if you are adding a field margin, you've got the option within your crop list under buffer strips and field margins to add that field margin in there. You can also use this option of splitting fields in the previous cropping and in the future cropping screens. Okay, so if I close out of that area now and move on to the multiple field cropping area, which is underneath that field information, underneath that add fields and crops area. So this just allows me to add one crop to a selection of fields. A time-saving way of adding that one crop. If you're just farming potatoes, perhaps you can add these all at the same time. So if I choose to just choose the Haymaker demo data, which I have more fields set up in, and then on the top left-hand side, choose my crop that I'm going to add. So I'll put some potatoes in there. The box underneath, you've got the option to choose variety. And then moving down into this middle section, you've just got these three options here: show all fields, show fields that have no current crop, and show fields that are not totally cropped. This is just to ensure that you're not double cropping your fields, and it will automatically select show fields that have no current crop, because this is usually where you want to be adding your crops. You'll then have a list of all your fields that aren't cropped yet in this available field section. And this area here is one that you'll see a lot in CropWalker. We call it our field picker area, and it can be used for selecting farms, selecting fields. And to select these fields, you can either just double click on them, which moves them across into that selected fields area on the right, or to move all the fields across, if you click this bottom arrow, it just moves all those fields across, and you can then add that crop to all those fields. So just to show you again, to move individual fields, I just double click them and it moves them back across. Okay, the other thing to note just in this screen, again, if you don't want to add the crop to the full area of the field, you've got this option here. So if you select the field that you don't want to fully crop, then just to the right of it, you've got text that says adjust cropping area of, and then the name of the field. You can just click into this box below and adjust the area that you want to crop. Once all these details are entered, you can just click this enter cropping button, and it'll just warn you again that you're about to enter crops on 26 fields in this case, just for the purposes so you don't double crop your fields. So if I click yes to continue there, and that means that this potato crop will have been added to all those fields that I moved across into the selected fields area. Okay, so if I just close out of there now and just go back, and I can try and answer some more of your questions. The last thing here that we've got to cover is the cropping report, which allows you to produce a report of all your fields and your crop information. So this can be really useful for handing over to your advisor with details of your fields and which crops are on these fields. So then if I go back into CropWalker, and to produce this report, by clicking the reports option in the top left hand side of the screen, and then move the mouse over the cropping reports option, and then click onto individual farm cropping to look at fields and crops from my individual farms. This opens a screen where you can choose which crops you want to view on this report, so either current cropping, or you can click onto the planted between option and choose the dates that you want to view on the report. Then further down this screen you have the select report option, where you can choose to view the report by crop or organised by field, and show more field details as well. So if I just look at my haymaker data here, again you've got this screen that we saw before in the multiple field cropping area, this field picker screen, or in this case to pick your farmers. So if I just double click that demo data and then click print preview, and this is where your cropping report appears. So you'll just see, you can see all those potatoes that I added in the multiple field cropping area, and you can then, if you go across to the third column, you can see which fields these crops are on, the dates that they're planted and the harvest date and the area of each field. Then for this particular crop you've got a subtotal of the area on the farm in hectares that this crop will take up. If I then move down, I can see other crops on the farm, which fields these are on, and again the date and the areas of these crops. And this report screen that you see here is one that you'll see often in CropWalker with plans, any kind of report that you're producing. So just to print this for your records, you can just click that print button on the top left hand side, and you also have the option here to export data. That export button, this is just if you're sending the data by email, perhaps to your advisor or agronomist. If you click this export button, you then have a list of drop-down options. So the export to email, that first option, can be used if you're using Outlook as your email provider. This just means that it automatically attaches this report to an email. If you're not using Outlook, you've got that second option, export to Adobe PDF, which just opens a save box, so you can then save this file onto your computer and attach it manually to an email. So if I just show you that export to email, you'll then you see the attachment there, and the email is automatically created. The other option, to attach the file manually, you get this save box. You can then save it and attach it to your emails. So if I just close out of there and go back to our agenda today, that is everything covered. So we looked at entering farm details and the contact details, and adding machinery and operators. Then we moved on to fields and crops. So first of all, I showed you how to add fields, and then to add single crops, and that is all in that one screen, just to remind you. Then we looked at splitting fields, so that's easily done. You add the first crop and then directly underneath adding the next crop. Then the time-saving way of adding one crop to many fields, just to remember that multiple field cropping option. And also the reports, so you have that information for your records, or you can share that information with anyone else. So again, after that section, I'll have a look at any questions we've got, and if you want to ask anything else, you can type this into the chat box.